Are we ready?
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
good to go now.
All right. We're glad to welcome you to our unusual meeting. I appreciate y'all being here. We appreciate you being here. And Marie, roll call.
Roger, I'm going to turn that over to Allison to do the roll call on this virtual meeting.
All right, Roger Friedel,
Yes.
Christy Bell,
Here.
Scott Morrison,
Here.
Jeff Coombs. Oh, he is here. Let me elevate him real quick. Jeff, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just can't turn off my mic.
Okay. David Pitcher,
Here.
Eric Franson,
Here.
Barbara Gardner, Barbara Gardner, are you there? See her on the staff side. It looks like her mic is green. All
Folks,
right.
can you get Barbara moved over?
She's a panelist. Maybe she's having some technical difficulties. Blake
I'll
Tullis
send her. I am. Here.
and Scott Baird.
Here.
Barbara, can you hear me? Oh,
I sent her an IM to see if she's having some problems.
okay.
I'll try and work with her on that.
I think we have a board and we're able to continue, I believe.
Yes,
So.
we have a quorum.
Okay, so let us move onward. Approval of minutes, February 27th, 2020. Any questions on those minutes?
This is Dave Pitcher. I'll move that we approve the February 27th, 2020 minutes.
Motion made by Dave,
This is Christy Bell. I'll second it.
second by Christie. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? We have minutes from April 27th. Any questions on those minutes? Anyone like to make a motion?
This is Scott Morrison. I can make a motion that we approve the April 27th, 2020 minutes.
Motion made by Scott,
I'll second him again.
second by Christie. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Disclosure for intent to publicly comment. I don't exactly know what that means, Marie. You tell me what
So we just changed the title on the agenda a little bit, so that if anybody were at our meetings and they wanted to let us know that they would like to publicly comment, we could find out what they would like to comment on and then give them an opportunity on that agenda item. So I think in this virtual meeting, we'll just see if anybody raises their hand or puts a comment in that they would like to make public comment.
And then they comment during the public comment time.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Operator Certification Commission, Michael Grange.
Roger, we skipped over the disclosure for conflict of interest.
Oh, yes, we did indeed. Do we have any conflicts of interest on anything that we will be discussing today?
This
Apparently
is
not.
This is Dave Pitcher. I work for a district that has a loan, and we'll be taking care of loan relief, but we don't anticipate applying for that loan relief, so I don't see that there's a conflict, but thought I'd just mention it.
Thank you. Any further?
This is Scott Morrison. I'm in the same boat as Dave, but we don't plan on requesting any relief.
Anything else? Thank you for your comments. Okay, how about Operator Certification Commission? Michael?
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So the Operator Certification Commission is a commission that is appointed by the division director. It's a 7-member commission that helps to oversee and run the Operator Certification program within the state. This commission generally meets 2 or 3 times a year. There are 7 members, as I mentioned, and one of those members is actually a representative of the Division of Drinking Water through the Drinking Water Board. Historically, this position had been filled by Brett Shanoff, who's been off the board now for some time. So what I'm proposing today is, or what I'm requesting today is that we have one of the members of the Drinking Water Board volunteer to serve as a member of the Operator Certification Commission. There's no real qualifications for this particular seat on the commission, but it would be beneficial to the program to have someone that is at least familiar with the Operator Certification Program as a member representing the Drinking Water Board. So I would open it up to discussion among the board. Hopefully I know everybody's busy. Everybody's got a lot on their plate, but this commission it's required by the rule, by our operator certification rule, and it's also one of the items in the baseline standards that we are required to meet in order to have a viable OpCert program and not lose 20% of our annual capitalization grant for the drinking water SRF program. So I'll open it to discussion among the board members.
Are we looking for volunteers?
I would like a volunteer. Sometimes volunteers are more dedicated and able to attend. Like I say, I know everybody's busy and it might be a little difficult, but we do plan to keep the meetings maybe quarterly at the most for the foreseeable future.
Are any of the current board members certified?
None that I'm aware of. Well, yeah, maybe
I'm a
Dave.
certified operator. Yeah,
Yeah,
treatment
Dave
treatment
or
for.
Scott Morrison may also be a certified operator. It's not
Yes,
required though of the board members.
Perhaps,
They have my vote.
Given that I'm already in the financial committee, I'd prefer to have somebody else do it, but if nobody else is interested, I'll take the reins.
I was going to say, perhaps we ought to see if somebody that's not on the financial committee could cover that, just to share the load.
Yes.
So I'm not an operator and don't have experience with operator programs, but I know an awful lot about pipe hydraulics, piping systems, the engineering side of that. I would be willing to do that if I were a good fit.
Second.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, as Blake tell us.
Well, thank you, Blake. I appreciate that. I will put you on the commission email group, and we'll be discussing a meeting coming up here shortly. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Status report, Michael.
Roger,
Yes.
before we continue, Barbara has rejoined the meeting. Let's see if we can hear her now. Barbara, are you there? Okay, she sent me a chat. It looks like she's having some audio problems, but she is in attendance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Status report for the state fund. We have a balance of roughly $3.4 million currently in the fund. Over the course of the coming year, we are expecting an additional roughly $4.5 million to come in through our annual sales tax revenue from the state, as well as our repayment streams, loans that are existing. So by May 21st of 2021, we're looking at roughly $7.8 million in the state program fund. We are currently working with a number of water systems to close loans that are authorized by the board. Those loans are outlined on the second page of the report. Unfortunately, none of those 4 communities at the top of the list there are close to closing on their loan. We're still working with them, trying to get them to that point. We have a number of planning loans and grants that are out that systems are using to develop master plans or engineering studies. Closed loans that are partially dispersed for projects that are still in construction. The Daggett County Dutch loan, Ephraim City, and the Mountain Regional Community Water loan. Are there any questions on the state program? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the federal program. The current balance in the federal program fund is $15.8 million. Over the course of the coming year, we're expecting another $21.3 million. That includes our 2020 capitalization grant, the 2020 state match, repayment streams, interest on investments, and our interest on loans. So by May of 2021, we're expecting roughly $37.2 million to be available in the federal program.
Michael?
On the next page, yes?
Will this COVID virus crap affect the money coming in at all?
It might. We have a discussion on that just a little bit later in the agenda. For this year, we're not expecting any issues, but the research that we've done, that staff has done, has indicated that there might be some concern with payments that are due in 2021 should things continue as rough as they are, or as rough as they have been. We can have that discussion just a little bit later on.
Thank you.
So we're working with a number of systems to close their loans. West Corinne is very close to closing their loan. Central Utah Water Conservancy District is very close. We're trying to schedule the closing for actually June 19th to close both their water treatment plant and their programmatic financing project loans. Swiss Alpine is moving closer. Those are the ones. Canyon Meadows is also moving closer on closing their loans. So those are the ones we're working with that are really close to closing. And then again, we have a number of planning advances and partially dispersed loans where the projects are still in construction. Granger Hunter is moving forward on their construction with their programmatic financing. Kearns Improvement District is moving forward on theirs. We actually have a construction inspection scheduled for the Kearns project before the end of June. Any questions on the federal program?
Hey, Michael, just nomenclature. When you say the loan is closing, that means they finished repayment, or that means they're ready to start spending the loaned funds?
When we talk about closing the loan, we are talking about dispersing the money so that they can begin construction. Yes.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
SRF
Any other
loan-
question?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Moving
SRF
on to
policy, is that what we're doing?
the project priority list is next.
Okay.
So we have 3 new projects being added to the priority list. Sigurdtown scored 27.5 points, and their project is a spring redevelopment, a 300,000 gallon tank, and a chlorinator. Old Meadows scored 26.4 points, and their project is a new water line and meters. And Willow Creek Water Company scored 16.7 points, and their project is a backup generator, a tank mixer, and meters. The Financial Assistance Committee has recommended that the Drinking Water Board approve the updated project priority list.
Michael, this is Jeff. I'd motion that the the Drinking Water Board approve the updated project priority list.
Motion made by Jeff.
Blake Tullis, second.
Blake, second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
SRF loan relief policy.
Yes, very good. Thank you. So the debt relief policy was the subject for the April emergency board meeting that we held via GoToMeeting. Excuse me, during that meeting, the board authorized staff to move forward with creating some documents and preparing existing documents to meet drinking water SRF requirements and nomenclature. So what staff has done is they developed 3 documents that are part of your packet. The first is the actual policy to implement debt relief to water systems impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically for this time, what staff did was try to develop a policy for just a general declared state of emergency, since this is not the first state of emergency that's been declared in the state, and it probably will not be the last. And historically, the board has not had a policy of this nature to allow debt relief during a declared state of emergency. So for this particular document, it's a generic document for a declared state of emergency that allows the board to entertain requests from loan recipients to relieve their debt if they can show that there is financial hardship that comes from this declared state of emergency. So for this particular policy, I'll just go ahead and read what was drafted. A Drinking Water Board policy regarding debt relief due to a declared state of emergency. Utah Code Title 19, Chapter 4, and Title 73, Chapter 10C, and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund provisions of the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act authorize the Drinking Water Board to provide financial assistance to drinking water systems for infrastructure improvement construction projects, and allow the board to restructure all or part of a recipient's liability to repay due to exigent circumstances. During a declared state of emergency and for 180 days following, The Drinking Water Board will accept requests from loan recipients to restructure their loans based on financial hardship. The board reserves the right to extend or shorten this time frame based on extenuating circumstances. Loan restructure requests may be granted based upon documentation of hardship due to a declared state of emergency. A written request, including associated documentation, must be submitted on the Drinking Water Board loan restructuring request form and be signed by the borrower's presiding official. A borrower's governing body must approve a restructuring request. The board does not assume any responsibility for the cost of the loan restructuring process. The board authorizes staff to review and grant requests for loan restructure due to financial hardship. The board authorizes staff to waive the delinquent interest charges for any late payment during the restructuring process. The board directs staff to prepare a written report for each board meeting detailing the number of loan restructures requested, the number of loan restructure requests granted, the names of the borrowers approved for restructuring, and the restructured loan amount. And then there's the signature block for Roger as the board chair. Any questions or comments on that policy that we drafted?
I have one question. This is Dave. Declared states of emergencies can be declared, I guess, on a county basis, state basis. So this applies to any state of emergency?
Staff would like the board to consider having a policy for any declared state of emergency. With the number of wildfires that we're having, and you know, they seem to be increasing. Many of them do affect drinking water systems that may lead to some form of financial hardship for the water system. While we don't anticipate we hopefully won't have too many of these, we would like the board to be prepared to offer some sort of debt relief to water systems that can show documented impact, financial impact due to a declared state of emergency.
This is Eric. I guess a more specific question is who can declare a state of emergency, right? Is it at the state level? Is it at the county level? Is it at the city level? Who can declare the state of emergency? Is it defined in this document, or is it open to any and all?
This policy does not define who can declare that a state of emergency. That would be up to the political leadership from, and again, I'm not the expert on emergency declarations, but the governor definitely has the authority to declare a state of emergency. Mayors may. Scott, do you have any input on who can declare an emergency?
This is Jeff. I know counties and municipalities can and have declared states of emergency related to the pandemic, so they could do so for other. But I do believe what we may need to research, and maybe Scott, you know, but I think the state may have to declare an emergency first before a county can. I'm not sure. I don't know that a county or municipality can declare that state of emergency unless the state has.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head for sure. I know there's been some question about that recently, given all of the responses and emergencies with COVID-19, and that it is something that the legislature wants to look at as well in light of all of this. So.
This is Dave. I like the idea that you're looking broader than the current situation. Wildfire is a good example of that. Maybe just add during the state or local declared state emergency. Might clarify that.
We can do that.
Any further comments?
I don't know. I think we might want to have some legal review on that. Because part of that state of emergency or those declarations is for qualifications for FEMA reimbursement and for other purposes as well, purchasing reasons, emergency purchasing. I don't know. I think we might want to have some legal review before we approve it. If we want to include, I think if we just say to set a state declared state of emergency, it would be okay. And I'm in favor of including locals. Not that I'm against that, but I just think we better have the legal backing to make sure that we can do that.
Just a question. This is Eric again. As we talked last time, there was mention that there are similar documents or similar policies that are in effect for other agencies. I believe water quality has a similar policy. Is it similar in wording to this? Have they already gone through the legal review process? I guess I'm just asking. I know we patterned this after other agencies, so how does it fit in there?
Right. I have not seen the actual water quality policy. Both water quality and we had drinking water patterned ours after the policy that was drafted and approved by the Community Impact Board. But I don't know if water quality had legal review of the policy. I don't know if CIB had legal review of their policy either. But we can certainly have that review done.
Yeah, this is Eric again. I guess not that I don't think this would happen often or potentially not maliciously, but maybe a circumstance where a community gets themselves into trouble financially, they have the authority to declare a state of emergency, for whatever reason. And the intent really is to circumvent or get out of financial responsibility as opposed to dealing with an actual state of emergency. And I guess when I ask the question, is it who is authorized to declare that? I do think that could lead to some challenges if we go too far down into the local level. That could present challenges even to the staff of administering this. You have one community that declares a state of emergency for themselves, and how does that affect what we're trying to do here? So I think there might need to be a balance there between statewide and local declarations in order to maintain some consistency on how the staff treats it and some consistency, even the authority to declare that, I guess, is some of my thoughts there.
This is Blake Tullis. Maybe another view on Eric's comments is, it may not matter so much who can declare the state of emergency. All that declaration does is allow someone to submit a request, but it's still subject to review, to scrutiny. And so I guess maybe an important thing is, what are the guidelines for evaluating those requests? Because it would be essentially easy to filter out those who self-declare and then ask for forgiveness on a loan. But the criteria for evaluating seems pretty important.
Right.
True statement.
And that question may be answered by the checklist that staff has prepared. That's the third page of this particular agenda item. So in order to, let's go to the second page first. In order to apply, the second page is the actual letter template that the water system would need to complete and submit to staff to be considered for loan restructuring. It basically says that, and the header would be changed to instead of saying to a declared emergency, it would be due to whatever the emergency was. In this case, it would be to the COVID-19 state of emergency. But then we ask for the information there, water system name, the project that was funded by the board, the due date of the annual payment, the amount of the annual payment, and the loan number. And then it goes through the terms. And then it's signed by the presiding official and then by me as the Assistant Executive Secretary to the Drinking Water Board. So that's the second page, which is the actual letter requesting the restructuring. So the checklist, we have gone through and tried to find the most efficient way to actually document hardship due to a declared state of emergency. And the ways that we came up with as we were discussing this as staff was to have them document their monthly revenue, the current data versus data for the preceding 12 months, so that we as staff could identify any trends in revenue shortfalls due to the emergency and when the emergency was declared. Monthly water use, again, current data versus data for the preceding 12 months. Any documentation of measures that the water system has taken to provide relief to their users, such as discontinued water shutoffs, delaying payments, allowing reduced payments, etc. Any documentation of retail or commercial or industrial water revenue lost due to business closures because of the declared state of emergency. And then the governing body has to approve it, both the board and the council, and then make sure that they've sent in a completed form, make sure that they list the existing loan terms. And then one of the more nuts and bolts kind of items that we thought was also important was, since we cannot approve loans that that exceed the estimated useful life of the infrastructure, we've asked that the water system provide a qualified professional's written estimate of remaining useful life for the system infrastructure that is associated with any drinking water SRF financial assistance. Any comments or questions on the checklist?
Yeah, this is Eric. I'll chime back in here. Having had Blake, I guess, introduce that concept, remembering that the staff is going to review this and approve or reject, I think it actually alleviates the concern that I raised to some extent on the declaration of state of emergency. So I think that helps me feel better about where we're at there. So I just wanted to say that.
Hey, Michael,
Great,
just a question as well. So the potential outcomes of this request would be for restructuring the loan, either extending the loan payment period or changing interest rates, or what? Is there any forgiveness involved? Debt forgiveness?
There is no forgiveness involved with this. The loan restructure could take a couple of different avenues. The water system could decide to issue a new bond for the amount of the loan repayment that they will be missing due to the declared state of emergency. And that bond, or that bond would have a due date as the very last payment on their loan. So if they had a $50,000 payment due in 2021 and their initial bond matured in 2028, that $50,000 payment that they missed in 2021 would then be due in 2029. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is to take that $50,000 that they owe in 2021 and draft a bond that spreads that payment out over the remaining life of the existing bond. So whether it be 10 years, 15 years, that $50,000 would be divided up amongst all those years and be due at the same time that their other loan payments are due. So no, there will be no forgiveness since it's already a loan, and there will be no change in, not necessarily a change in interest rate either. Although if the board were to declare that, we could, instead of giving them the interest rate that they have on their existing loan, we could use the more recent revenue bond index rate as the starting point again and recalculate a new interest rate for the new bond. But it may be a more simple and straightforward method to just give them the same terms that they were granted under the initial bond.
Yeah, thank you. That seems fair, and that I think is going to keep people focused on, well, do we really want to do this or not? Because we still have the same responsibility. It just gives us short-term relief. So I think it meets the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
So Michael, this is Jeff. I want to just go back to that. Who can declare a state of emergency? If we were to get a legal review of that, I imagine we want to get this program started as soon as we can. How long would that delay that to have that done?
I don't know. I don't know what the Attorney General's office schedule is as far as their current workload. I don't know.
Well, you have,
We would have to.
DQ has assigned attorneys, don't they, that
Yes.
work for the Attorney General's office?
Yes, we do.
So how to be able to, quick turnaround, or do they have to go to somebody above them to make that determination?
Jeff, we do have an assigned Attorney General counsel to the division. I think we could get a fairly quick review of that. The question would then be, I mean, we can't do that during this meeting, so
I understand.
It would be a matter of delaying this policy until the next board meeting if we want that done. But we do have legal availability.
Board, what would you like to do?
Would it be inappropriate to basically do both in parallel, that, you know, with our best judgment, go ahead and move this forward, approve it, but ask for legal counsel to review it, and then it could be amended at future meetings if required? Would that get us into trouble if we actually implement, if someone actually used it between now and then?
I think, in my opinion, Blake, I think we'd be all right because we're under a current state of emergency, whether it's local or state. They've been invoked by both. And for the particular emergency that we're dealing with, I think I'm more concerned about other potential scenarios that could arise. And so I wouldn't be opposed if DQ's on board and with that. I would be okay with that as long as that's something that would be reviewed and we could amend at a future board meeting.
May I make a suggestion that maybe if the board's comfortable, they approve this policy just for a given amount of time? And then that would give us time to go back out to and have a legal review of issuing a state of emergency. And then we could bring that information back when this expires. And you can decide whether you want to keep it as a ongoing policy for emergencies or whether it was just for COVID and or fires the next few months. Or any other emergency.
And floods and locusts.
Because I do not know what the next emergency is.
Or an earthquake. Not that we'd never have those, right?
Right. We've been having a lot of things I never thought we'd have.
Yeah, this is.
I'm comfortable with that. How much time would you recommend? Is the next board meeting enough time? Do we want to go out a couple meetings?
Maybe 6 months.
That's what I was
thinking.
It kind of seems like 6 months would start to capture some who might be feeling the effects of the COVID-19 state of emergency. And we still may not see much over the summer. It might take a little bit of time for those to come through. So I wonder if 6 months would be good.
Well, this is Dave. One observation is state of emergency for COVID was in March. So your 6 months, your 180 days is September 4th. We have one meeting scheduled between that time.
I guess I was proposing 6 months from the time we approve the policy rather than the state of the emergency declaration.
Okay.
But that does raise a good point. What happens if over the 6 months the state of emergency is rescinded by the state? We go to level green or something, then that may have impact as well.
Yeah, the policy says that during the declared state of emergency and 180 days following. So
that's right. Yeah.
Maybe we should clarify that, say 180 days after the emergency is, I don't know what the legal term is, but
expires.
During the conversation, yeah, it expires. That's right. Thank you. So during that April conversation, that 180 days, 6 months was what the board requested that we put in there for, so that during the length of the emergency, however long that emergency lasts, and then when the emergency expires, loan recipients then have 180 days beyond the expiration of the emergency to declare financial hardship. And so that's the base term of the restructuring ability of the board. And then at the end of the 180 days, if the board so desires, they can extend it again for a specific period of time. Or if during that 180-day period after the emergency expires, the board desires to shorten the term, the policy allows for either of those cases.
This is
So I don't
Jeff.
think, yeah, go ahead.
My preference would be that we approve this policy until the next board meeting and then review it again for continuation. I think we can get a legal interpretation in that amount of time, and then we can make it permanent if we so decide at that time. But I really don't want to kick the can too far down the road. I want to have an answer if we're within our legal, if we have any legal complications as soon as we can. So I'd rather, my preference would be to approve the policy until the next board meeting and then review it for, to either continue the policy or amend it.
So Jeff, just to clarify, the legal review is on who can declare an emergency and what the criteria is for that declaration. Is that correct?
That's what I would expect, correct.
That sounded an awful lot like a motion to me.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, this is Eric. I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Michael, principal forgiveness.
Yes, thank you. So at a previous board meeting, you were asked to prepare a conversation on principal forgiveness. And then it was brought up again at one of our financial assistance committee meetings, specifically with regard to one of the projects that was actually qualified to receive a sizable amount of principal forgiveness from the federal program. So a basic discussion of principal forgiveness and the effect that it has on the revolving fund. Every year when Congress approves the budget for the EPA, they include in that budget amounts for the drinking water and clean water state revolving fund programs. It varies from year to year. It's never really the same amount. Typically for the state of Utah, over the last few years, it's been anywhere from $9 to $11 million. We as a state get 1% of whatever Congress appropriates to the entire program. So the going back to this, to the financial report for the federal program, you can see that the 2020, and you don't have to go back to it. I'll just read it off of my copy here. For 2020, our federal grant is, or excuse me, the federal grant going to the actual construction fund is just over $8 million. And so as a result of that, okay, excuse me, step back one more time. When Congress appropriates that money, they also tell the states how much of that money they are allowed to use for principal forgiveness for disadvantaged communities. Typically, it's between 20 and 30% of the capitalization grant. And for the 2020 grant, that number was, I believe, 30%. So if we're looking at a capitalization grant of $8 million, plus the state match of $2.2 million, which makes up for the money that comes out as set aside. So we roughly have $10 million going to the construction fund that we could then use 30% of that for principal forgiveness, or about $3 million. Principal forgiveness is just what it means. It's basically a grant that the water system does not repay. So the effect of that on the program is that we do not see a repayment stream come back on that money. As it stands right now, we currently have about $1.2 million left in the hardship fund, or the principal forgiveness fund that we have out for to give to our disadvantaged communities. The town of Sigurd, which is the town that is requesting, well, it's not actually requesting, but they qualify for a significant amount of grant. Let me run ahead here to their request. They actually qualify for about $700,000 in grant. $680,000 is what they qualify, which would be roughly half of what we have left in our grant, or our principal forgiveness money for this year. The other half of that is, the year is almost over. Federal fiscal year ends September 30th, and the new fiscal year starts October 1st. We apply for the 2021 grant in March or April of 2021, and so those funds, that principal forgiveness amount will change on a regular basis throughout the year. We do try and be very careful with how much staff recommends that the board authorize in principal forgiveness, and it's good that the board considers that and looks at the overall program and the overall amount of money that's available. Our staff, our financial staff, Sandy Pett and Jeremy Andrews, are very good at watching and letting staff know if we are getting close to that ceiling of the 30% of the funding for principal forgiveness. So that's the base principal forgiveness. Another option that Congress sometimes invokes and sometimes they don't, and they have invoked it for the last couple of years, is and I can't remember the exact term, it's a congressional prerogative to allow states to use even more of the capitalization grant for principal forgiveness. For the 2020 grant, which is the one we're applying for and should be in our hands by end of July or 1st of August, the Congress authorized the states to use an additional 6 to 20% grant or of the capitalization grant as principal forgiveness. So for 2020, we could actually use about 50% of that cap grant for principal forgiveness, which would be roughly $5 million. We don't necessarily like to do that, and except in those cases where the system really is disadvantaged and really does need a high level of grant principal forgiveness. We try to use the base amount only and only go into that congressional prerogative if needed. So from the standpoint of what's currently before the board, what will currently come before the board today, we do have adequate funding available to the board to authorize the principal forgiveness that is in the packets for the applicants today. So are there any
Michael,
questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Blake. What happens to those funds if they're not allocated in the given fiscal year? Are they carried over, or do we lose those? The debt forgiveness.
So, yeah, the forgiveness, the amount of principal forgiveness does not carry over from year to year. So with this year's funds, as long as we meet the 30% floor that Congress has approved, there are no repercussions. The rest of it just goes out as loan.
So the consequence, I guess, is deciding whether you do the debt forgiveness or you use funds that you get payment back on, right, to keep the system going.
Correct. Gotcha. The board basically has two mandates. We as staff have these two mandates, and they're in a sense they're competing. We are supposed to use the fund to provide subsidy to those systems that need it to keep water rates at a reasonable level, affordable level. The other competing mandate is that we're supposed to protect the fund so that we do make it a revolving fund, so that we're getting those repayment streams in to then loan back out to other water systems. The more that staff recommends and the more that the board approves these principal forgiveness funds, that then impacts how much of a repayment stream we have, and could, over the course of time, have a greater impact on the board's ability to maintain a revolving fund.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to clarify that, in this today.
Any further questions for Michael?
I have one clarification question. Blake's question is a good one, but that only lasts for 1 year.
David, is that you
Dave?
speaking? We can't hear you anymore.
You're breaking up pretty bad.
Okay, I might leave and come back.
Dave, you could type a message as well, if that's helpful, over on that text message box.
So, Michael, does the board need to vote to approve this intended use plan, or is this for information only?
Yeah, when we get to the intended use plan, it's information only.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, I guess we go to the intended use plan, Michael.
All right, thank you. And to that discussion of principal forgiveness and grant, if any of you as board members would like to talk to me offline in another setting via phone call or email, please feel free to get a hold of me and let me answer questions that you might have that weren't discussed during this time.
Is my mic better now?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Much better, David.
Okay. My question was, if the total amount in the annual basis is not used, it doesn't carry on,
Correct.
accumulate. So each year's amount is the total amount that can be considered for forgiveness. That's correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, intended use plan. You have a copy of the intended use plan in the packet. The program as established by Congress requires this intended use plan be submitted every year to EPA. Basically what it is a description of how the state intends to use the money allocated in the capitalization grant. It describes the program, gives a little bit of history of what we've done, and then includes our project priority list and other language on things that we will do as a program to meet the requirements of the statute in the Safe Drinking Water Act. This is something that we publish every year. Typically, it's brought to the board at the February or the May meeting. We had a little bit of a lag due to the different emergencies that we've been dealing with, COVID and such. But basically, it's just to let you know that this intended use plan has been finalized. The draft is available on our webpage for public comment. And as soon as we receive any comments or no comments, this will then be forwarded to EPA to fulfill our requirements under the statute. It does give a good background and explanation of what we do as a program within the state of Utah. So if you're interested, please go ahead and read through that and then let us know if you've got any questions or comments. But again, this is information only. There's no board action required, just to let you know that it is out there.
Do we have any questions for Michael? I guess not.
Okay.
Applications, Scipio, Heather.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, okay. So I had a conversation with the engineer for Scipio Town. Scipio had applied for some funding through rural development as well, and they were just approved to fund the entire project. So they have decided to pull their application with the Division of Drinking Water to save on the cost of additional bonding. So we don't have anything for Scipio at this time.
Thank you. Okay. Sky Cyber, Diamond Valley deauthorization.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Sky Sieber, Project Manager with the Drinking Water SRF program. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful. So I'll be presenting two projects. The first pertains to Diamond Valley Acres Water Company. In February of 2019, the Drinking Water Board authorized a federal loan in the amount of $235,000 to the water company so they could equip an existing well, connect it to their system. And then in March of this year, we received correspondence from Diamond Valley Acres indicating that they have decided to not go ahead with the loan, that they were able to complete the project using their own funds. So the Financial Assistance Committee recommends the Drinking Water Board deauthorize a loan of $235,000 with a hardship grant assessment fee of 2.5% for 20 years to Diamond Valley Acres Water Company. Any questions?
Any discussion?
This is Jeff.
Make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the Drinking Water Board deauthorize a loan of $235,000 with a hardship grant assessment fee of 2.5% for 20 years to Diamond Valley Acres Water Company.
This is Scott Morrison. I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Will-
The second project, this pertains to a request from San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District. We do have 4 representatives for this project on the meeting with us today. And after my presentation, I will unmute them so that they are able to address the board and answer any questions you might have. But they are requesting supplemental funding to pay for cost overruns on their newly constructed water system. There's a little bit of history on this project. The Drinking Water Board did authorize a loan in 2016, roughly $2.5 million at 0% interest for 30 years, with 30% of that in principal forgiveness. Prior to construction, bids came in slightly higher than anticipated. And at that time, San Juan County did not want to go back to the funding agencies. They also received financial assistance from CIB. And they opted to handle those potential cost overruns themselves. The system was substantially completed last fall. The county is still in the process of connecting some of the users, but San Juan County now has new administration, and they would and do prefer to go back to the funding agencies to request supplemental assistance. So the total amount of funding requested is $600,000. They are at this time requesting that full amount from drinking water. And to clarify, this would be a second loan in addition to their first loan. Currently, the local MAGI for San Juan County is $44,300. That's 92% of state MAGI. And their current average water bill is $47. That's an estimated average water bill because they're still connecting users. Their after loan estimated water bill would be $74.93, which is 2% of their local MAGI. So they do qualify for the additional subsidy. So based on that, the Financial Assistance Committee is recommending the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $600,000 at 0% interest for 30 years with $180,000 in principal forgiveness to San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District. There would be no condition to resolve issues on their IPS report because they currently have none. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. I will go ahead and unmute the representatives from the system that are here with us today and have each one of them introduce themselves. And then if you have any questions for any of us, we'll take those questions. Dan, I think you're unmuted. If you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Dan Hawley with Jones and DeMille Engineering, been the design engineer and engineer through design and construction of the project. And just wanted to say we appreciate you taking time to hear us out today.
Thank you. And do we have Lloyd Wilson from the district, Special Service District?
Yes, this is Lloyd Wilson. I'm a board member of the service district and also kind of acting manager at this point.
Wonderful. And then we do have a representative from San Juan County online.
Yes, this is Mac McDonald, County Administrator. Appreciate the board and the willingness to entertain this request from San Juan County. Kind of as was explained, the project in its initial phases and as it's proceeded with typical cost overruns throughout time, we had just found that we were in trouble with this project and needed the additional resources to finalize and finish up this project so that we can get everything finished up. And so kind of a short summary of the history.
Do we have any questions from the board?
Any questions, board?
I've got a couple questions. One, what types of connections are they, and did the service area expand from the time that you started the project to the time it ended?
Boyd, do you want me to?
Yeah,
answer
if you
that?
would.
You bet. So it's Dan Hawley with Jones and DeMille. When we started the project, it was focused on connecting all of the existing residential, primarily connections in the area in San Juan County. There were just a couple of commercial connections. As we have gone through design and construction, there were some additional equivalent residential connections that came on board where people had expanded or subdivided some properties within the service area of the project. And we did, if they wanted to connect, we did work with them to try to connect them. So ultimately there are over 230 equivalent residential connections upon completing the project based on the kind of quick little burst of growth that happened with expanding a new water system through the area. Primarily residential though.
Further questions? Hearing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, this is Eric. I'll make a motion. The Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $600,000 at 0% interest for 30 years with $180,000 in principal forgiveness to the San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District.
Motion made by Eric.
This is Dave. I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Do we need to have roll call on any of this stuff? I don't. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Heather, Willow Creek.
Okay. Willow Creek Water Company is requesting financial assistance in the amount of $123,000. Their project includes a backup generator, meters, and a tank mixer. The local MAGI for Willow Creek is 117% of the state MAGI. And their after project water bill at full loan would be $84.61, which is 1.81% of the local MAGI. The Financial Assistance Committee recommends that the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $123,000 at 1% interest for 20 years, with conditions to include that they resolve all issues on their compliance report. We do have a couple of people in attendance from the system. We have Troy Cooper. I'm sorry, Colt, it is not letting me unmute Troy.
See what I can do.
Let me try to unmute Eric Durstor. Okay, so I was able to unmute Eric.
Troy is
Self-muted. So we do have Eric Dursteller, who's the engineer. Eric, if you would like to address the board for anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I hadn't planned on taking too much time, just to identify some of the things I think you accomplished with this. These improvements are to help the chlorine concentration mixing in the tank. It had some problems with some poor or reduced chlorine tests in the system. So this tank mixer should help that. The generator's been on the docket for quite some time, and it's required. And this simply help the system in the event they do have a power outage.
Any further
The water
questions?
meters are quite outdated, and they have something need to replace. So, and they want to make these as ready to read as I recall. So again, this will help them out, get them up to date, and put them in a position they can continue on. That helps out.
Further questions, board?
This is Marie. I just had one comment. So this emergency generator would resolve their significant deficiencies on their record. It does show that this system has a violation from 2019 for missing total coliform samples. Can you speak to that violation?
Is there a way to unmute Natalie Erickson? She's on the call as well.
She'd be better at that, yeah, than I would.
Sure. Okay, she should be unmuted now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Natalie,
Natalie, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So with regard to missing the sample, we have been working significantly with our water tester. He's missed a few, and so we've been really trying to keep on top of them for that. So apparently that should fall off this July. We're a fairly new board. We had some drastic changes last year with the death of our founder, and then we needed to excuse one other member who was running everything. And so we have taken over with this new board and have kind of been climbing uphill for much of the ways. It's been quite the learning curve, but we're getting there. So we're trying to get on top of these sampling issues and the deficiencies that we've had, like, you know, with the generator, that apparently should have been taken care of quite a while ago. And we've ended up reinventing the wheel with much of it, as we've had to redo a lot of the work that was done that we didn't know about because that information was not passed on to us.
Okay, thank you.
If no other questions, would somebody be like in mood to make a motion?
This is Scott Morrison. I can make a motion the Drinking Water Board. Oh, let me get on the right page here. Bear with me. Drinking Water Board authorized a loan of $123,000 at 1% interest for 20 years, with the conditions included that they resolve all issues on their compliance report.
This is Roger.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Heather, Sigurd.
Okay, Sigurd Town is requesting $2,300,000 in financial assistance for a spring redevelopment with associated piping, a 300,000 gallon tank, and a chlorinator. Sigurd Town is contributing $100,000 to the project for a cost of $2,400,000. The local MAGI for Sigurd is 73% of the state MAGI. The average water bill is $38.57 per month, which is 1.32% of their local MAGI, but the after project water bill jumps it up to 3.15% of the local MAGI, so they do qualify for additional subsidy. There was a lot of discussion during the committee call about how to make this project more affordable for the system. One of the items discussed was to extend the term of the loan portion. So I added a couple lines on the table to extend it to a 40-year loan. There was some discussion that the life expectancy, 40 years is enough for the life expectancy of the project. So there was not a recommendation from the Financial Assistance Committee, as they wanted to include the entire board on the discussion. Oh, and also we have on the call Kelly Chappell and Kelly Alvey from the water system. Let me unmute them real quick. Are you there, Kelly?
We both are.
Okay, great. Did you want to talk to the board or say anything to the board about your project?
Yes, I'm Mayor Alvey, and my name's Kelly Alvey. There's some needs that we have, and so if you look at that, like our springs, for example, some of those haven't even had any work done since the 30s, and so we need to repipe some of those and redo some of the work on that. We have a well that is a real problem, so we want to switch to this other well. We're afraid that before long the casing might eat through and then our water system would be compromised. And so we're pretty worried about that. So that's a big thing also. And that's just down from where our springs are at. And then we have a tank that's been in for like 75 years, maybe a little more than that. We patched it and worked on it a few times. And so that's why we'd like to put in another tank. And so that's kind of where we're at. There are just some needs that we really feel that we need to make it so we don't have a problem and have our water system compromised. So any questions? That's just kind of in a nutshell to tell you about it. But
This is Jeff Combs on the board. Have you had town meetings or public participation where you've talked about the water bill increase?
we've talked to different people in town. We'd like to have a meeting before long to do that. That's what I've been nervous about, is to raise, looking at this, I think it'll raise the bill maybe another $10 or something a month, which we do have some people that kind of have a hard time paying the bill as it is. But there's some things that we really need to take care of. And so I think that, if we have a meeting, I think that they would agree that this is probably something we need to do.
So again, this is Jeff. Do you folks have a preference on the term of the loan, whether it be 20, 30, or 40 years?
Well, we'd rather have it 30 instead of 40, but on the other hand, whatever we need to do to make it so it would be the best, so we didn't have too high of a water bill, and with your help. So maybe you have some ideas to help us.
Michael, this is Scott Morrison. I believe this was the project that kind of led into the discussion regarding principal forgiveness. Can we circle back on that briefly? In the context of this proposal, it's either it's either 680,000 or 910,000 that will go against that, I believe, 1.2 million that's in the account. Is that correct?
Yes. And
that
one
account reported.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say that the number on their board report is the base number of the 30% and what's left available out of that number, or that amount of money. So if you add the other 20% that Congress, through their discretionary powers, has granted this year, there will be sufficient funds there to cover not only the SIGID request, but potential requests for the rest of this year.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Michael, that would be at 680 or 910.
Yes.
What do you think, board? This is Roger, and if I were them, I would feel more comfortable on the 30-year loan instead of the 40, if that's possible.
Yeah, this is Scott Morrison. I like option 4 personally. I think 40 years is too long. I'm also concerned just about the significant increase in the bill. To the mayor, there was discussion about the bill going up $10 per month. Is there an interim step here that I'm missing? In the board report, it's showing that the current average water bill is $38.57, and the proposed water bills are, in the ranges of 60s and up.
That's what I was talking to you about.
Yeah, this is Kelly Chappell here with the Ensign. Yeah, so one thing that we talked about with the drinking water staff just briefly is they just Sigurtown just recently paid off a drinking water loan very, very recently, and so the money that went to that prior loan, if routed to this new loan, would make that increase, that $10 increase a little bit more affordable than the $30 that it looks like with those figures that are on the agenda or on the packet right now.
This is Eric. I guess I'll ask a follow-up question to that then. If the after project water bill with the subsidy ends up being around $48, $50 as indicated, what would that be in relationship to the Magi? I know you had 3.15 in the in the staff comments, and then we're at 2.3 or 2.2, somewhere in that neighborhood. Would that drop down into the 1.7, 1.8 threshold? Sorry, making you do math on the fly here.
Well, I had their spreadsheet open, but I wasn't able to hear everybody, so I had to close all my windows so that I could hear everything. I can get back into the spreadsheets.
Because I guess part of the consideration on the amount of principal forgiveness is that second number on what the after project water bill will be as it relates to the kind of the target range of the 1.7%. And so
I agree, Eric. My comments were with the understanding that we were going from 38.57 up to 69.68 in option 4.
Right.
So we'd have to redo the spreadsheet and see because that'll increase their revenue if they don't have to make that payment on that other loan. And that wasn't indicated in the application. So I'd need to get that number of how much more revenue they'll have without having that loan. Let's see, let me change my spreadsheet.
Yeah, I guess for go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, quick napkin, back of the napkin math would indicate that at a $50 a month water bill, we're in the 1.7, 1.8 range.
Right. So looking at the financial assistance evaluation page, the spreadsheet page, this particular loan comes under the other debt and coverage amount. So taking some additional numbers from that and looking at the numbers, it looks like reducing things around could reduce their water bill to about $60 a month with that additional, or subtracting the other debt, which is the loan payment that they're already making from their annual expenses, reduces the proposed water bill or estimated water bill to about $61 a month, which is still going to be
they're pretty good.
It's
So
going to be up there
1.9.
around 1.9, yeah, 1.9, 1.95% of their MAGI.
That's the figures that we have as well, Michael. So I think you're right on target there.
Hey, this is Eric here again. We like nice clean numbers, but I'm going to make a motion that's not necessarily one of the four. and maybe it's a compromise. I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize a loan of 2.3 million, 0% fee, term of 30 years, principal forgiveness of 800,000. Can I do that off the fly like that?
You certainly can.
Let's split the
If you're a
difference.
board member, you can do whatever you want.
Well, let's split the difference there and just find some happy medium.
What was the term limit on that?
30 years.
So clarification on that, Eric, is that because will that get the Magi closer to what you would like to see it be at?
No, I just think it would come down obviously from, the 2.3. I guess it would kind of get us maybe to a similar spot without the full 910,000 based on that other loan that had been paid off. So I guess I didn't feel comfortable coming all the way down to the 680 because I think that might be a little too far for them on their financial situation, but it was coming off of that high of 910 in light of the new information of paying off that loan. So I just stabbed at a number. There's not a lot of detailed science behind that.
This is Jeff. I'll second that stab.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather, looks like you get to prepare a new repayment schedule.
That's
Thanks,
okay.
Heather.
Thank you.
Unless I've missed something, it is Michael again, Provo River Water Users WIFA project.
Yes, thank you. I discussed this with the board at the meeting in St. George back in late February, early March. Gave you a quick rundown on the WIFIA program and how WIFIA and the state SRF programs are cooperating. Mentioned that the Provo River Water Users Association was approaching WIFIA for a loan to work on a project that they need down there that is rather expensive. We've invited Keith from Provo River Water Users Association to present to the board today. Let me unmute him. There he is. Keith, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So Keith sent me a presentation. So I'm going to bring that up and try and share my screen with the board so that we can, everybody can see it. Okay, is the Deer Creek Intake Project showing up on everybody's screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So Keith, if you'd like to begin your discussion, and when you'd like me to change the slide, just say so and I will advance the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that. Thank you, board, for letting us have a minute of your time. You're looking at Deer Creek Reservoir, kind of maybe a westerly look toward the dam. Go ahead, Michael. We just wanted to, our theme for this, our tagline, I guess, for this project, safeguarding water, securing our future. for the Deer Creek Intake Project. Next slide. We want to give you an update on this project and where we are. And first of all, just want to give you a little background on Deer Creek Dam and Reservoir. Approximately half of Utah's water supply comes through Deer Creek Reservoir, either Provo River Project water, natural flow water, or Central Utah Project water. All has to come through the Deer Creek Dam outlet works. So it's vital to Utah's economy. Also, Deer Creek is the home of the Deer Creek State Park, which has been in place for almost 50 years. It's one of the most utilized recreational spots in Utah. The problem that we have there is 80-year-old intake structure and guard gates that are getting close to the end of their life, and so we need to look at them and do something about it before something horrible happens, and we wish we would have done it. Next slide, please. So to prepare for this, our board authorized a study which was completed in 2018. This study looked at the aging infrastructure of the outlet works, looked into invasive species problems, particularly quagga mussel, water quality issues, and looked at the possible scheduling for a project, and then coordination with agencies, including the state parks, as I mentioned. Next slide. So as I said, the intake and the guard gates are approximately 80 years old. The concern we have there is multifold. One of the issues is that the guard gates, the full pressure and head of the reservoir is on the upstream side of those guard gates. There's no way to isolate them to work on them. We've had some issues with operation. It takes additional pressure to open them. We're concerned that if they happen to fail in an open state, then the water would drain out of the reservoir, or could, or if they fail in a closed state, then we'd have a very difficult time getting the water delivered out of the reservoir. Can't maintain them in their current state. Manufacturer parts are no longer available. Also, there's a concern about invasive species, primarily quagga mussel, as I mentioned. In 2014, there was quagga mussel DNA found in Deer Creek Reservoir, and for the next 3 years, a very accelerated sampling program was instituted at Deer Creek to test for quagga mussel, and it didn't ever find any, thankfully. But for 3 years, we were considered a suspect water body, and so there's a lot of measures were taken to prevent infestation of other water bodies from Deer Creek, thinking we might be infested, or also to prevent us from being infested in case we really weren't. That measure was lifted in the end of 2017, 2018, first of 2018, but it's still a concern. And when we were a suspect water body, we investigated what that meant to other dams and outlet works around the west that do have the quagga mussel, including, as you know, Lake Powell, Lake Mead, those dams and outlet works, and the cost to deal with quagga mussel is staggering, and the impact to outlet works and to power plants is also very substantial. And so, and not to mention the impacts on the reservoir ecosystem. So those are all things that are of great concern to Provo River Water Users Association and all of our shareholders and water users that use the water. Next slide. So one of the great things about this project is our design engineer is AE2S Engineering, and I have some of their representatives with me here today for questions if you have any later. But they submitted an innovative design proposal that would allow us to address these issues without draining the reservoir. For a number of years, we've been thinking that was the only way to do this, would be to drain the reservoir, replace the intake structure, rehabilitate the gates or replace them, and then hope that Mother Nature could provide us another 2011 or 2017 year to fill up the reservoir again. But that was a pretty dicey prospect, as you can imagine. So this innovative design and construction method that they proposed will allow us to do this work without draining the reservoir, which is great. Another thing that's really wonderful is some state-of-the-art design features that will help us to deal with quagga mussel, such as having instituting coatings or different materials that the quagga mussel would not adhere to as easily. So they're incorporating that into their design as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. This shows you a cross section of Deer Creek Reservoir, just a cartoon, obviously, but on the left side there is the intake structure in the reservoir, and then a approximately 500 foot, 600 foot long tunnel that goes to a gate chamber where the guard gates are, approximately the access of the dam, and then a 500 foot penstock tunnel, 2 penstocks that go to the outlet works and to the power plant. So we would replace the intake structure and then, as I said, replace or rehabilitate the guard gates in the center of the dam. Next. So as I mentioned, the design now is no draining of the reservoir, so we don't have to wait for a dry year to start. We don't have to hope for a wet year following construction to fill up again, which is a great relief. Our schedule we're currently on, we're pursuing preliminary design and studies, geotechnical investigations in 2020, and final design will take place towards the end of this year, next year, and with hopefully construction beginning in early 2022 and lasting perhaps 18 months or so. These pictures here, the one on the top shows our drilling barge. We currently have drillers out on the reservoir right now, drilling into the reservoir foundation, trying to see what kind of stability we have to build the intake structure. So this is them getting their barge all ready to go and floated out on site, and they'll be drilling up there for the next 2 or 3 months. The middle picture shows a possible construction method that we might use to construct the intake structure and then float it in place and sink it into place and attach it. So they're going through the alternatives right now, and we're going to evaluate them throughout this year. The bottom picture Dave will recognize is Central Utah Water Conservancy District's intake tower in Jordanelle Reservoir. We anticipate our tower will be something similar. You'll see the tower sticking out of the reservoir. There'll be an access bridge. I also wanted to mention it's important to note that there will be a community awareness, a public involvement effort throughout this whole project. We've already sent flyers out, press releases. We will have public involvement meetings. We'll have NEPA scoping and all of that throughout the entire length of the project. That's a very important part of it. Next slide. This gives you an indication of the schedule. 2018-2019 was the preliminary study I mentioned. We're in the middle of gathering information now and formulating alternatives in 2020 with final design, as I mentioned, next year. We'll also incorporate what's called a CMGC, or a construction manager general contractor, construction manager at risk. There's other names for that, into our design process, and we're excited about that. That will enable us to have a much more robust design. We'll have a contractor on board with us during the design phase that will help us to have a different perspective, a contractor's perspective, someone that does this kind of work, to enable us to make sure that we have the best design possible. So we're excited about that. And you can see the rest and the communications extending throughout the entire length of the project. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about funding options. Obviously, that's why we're talking with you today. Thank you for that again. So WIFIA is our main target for funding because of the terms they can provide, and not just the rates, but also the opportunity to defer your repayment schedule, to sculpt your repayment around other obligations. Lots of options there that are very attractive. So we've been working closely with a consultant to prepare a letter of interest to get in line for that funding. They have not opened their funding yet for 2020. That should happen any day. We just actually had a conversation with the deputy administrator today. They expect it within about 2 weeks to issue their notice of available funding, and then there'll be 90 days within which potential applicants can submit their letter of interest, and that's what we hope to do. But WIFIA funds won't fund it all, and so we have also We're also looking to the Drinking Water Board and/or the Water Resources Board to help us. We've approached Central Utah Water Conservancy District for some assistance there, and they've committed to help us as well. And then, of course, we have some of our own money that we've already taken out a loan and using for our preliminary studies, and it's targeted for our design work as well. So a combination of all of these together, we hope we'll be able to fund this approximately $40 million project. Next slide. So Michael gave you a very good description of the WIFIA program in your March or February meeting. Just wanted to reemphasize, it's a great program that EPA has. I say here that they leverage federal funds 100-fold. That's exactly what they're doing for 2020. Congress has authorized $55 million in budget authority, and they'll take that $55 million and turn it into $5.5 billion in WIFIA loans. And then they expect that money to be able to finance about $11 billion in water infrastructure investments. So it's actually more than 100-fold leverage. So it's an amazing program, and we hope that we'll be able to qualify and be part of it. They have a $20 million minimum project size, so we meet that qualification. As I mentioned, they'll only fund up to 49% of a selected project, so we will be responsible to find the additional 51%. And what that would be, just so you know, as I mentioned, Central Utah Water Conservancy District has agreed to pay 17% of this cost. So if it's a $40 million project, that's $6.8 million. The association has already bonded for $7 million. So there's an additional either somewhere between 26 and 29 million, depending on if a debt reserve is required. For WIFIA loans, a debt reserve is not required. I understand for a drinking water loan and Board of Water Resources loan, they are required. So somewhere between 26 and 29 million would need to be funded from other sources. So that's what we're looking at from, as I said, from the Drinking Water Board or the Board of Water Resources. Next slide. So again, we feel like we meet a lot of the WIFIA funding criteria. We don't meet all of them because we're different. We're a different animal than they normally fund. But in every discussion that we've had with them, they've been very excited about funding our project, and they want to know more about it. And they think that we diversify their portfolio, so that's a great thing. So ours is considered a regionally significant project. It's affected by climate change and extreme weather. It's a multi-generational $40 million project, provides water for drinking water primarily, and also irrigation and industrial. The sooner we can qualify for the funds, we can get this project started, which is great because, as I said, even if we will ask WIFIA, if we qualify, we'll ask them for a delayed repayment because we have some other obligations that we'd like to get out of the way, and they will be able to work with us on that. So we're excited about that. We talked about the invasive species issue that this will be a great project to address those. Our population that we serve is expected to increase, as you know, especially along the Wasatch Front and the Wasatch back by 75% in the next 40 years. So this will help us to meet those water needs and not have restrictions on our water supply because our intake our outlet doesn't work properly, our 80-year-old infrastructure. And we will demonstrate that we can meet the cost share responsibilities. Next slide. So just to wrap up, you've seen these slides before. 1 out of every 2 Utahns uses water that comes through this reservoir. It's very significant. That this project is necessary, and we should be shovel ready by early 2022 to take advantage of the funds that you might be able to make available to us. Thank you. I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you, Michael.
Very welcome. Any questions from the board?
No, thank you for that presentation.
All right. We just wanted to bring this to you to further the discussion that we had back in St. George in February. Depending on the results that Provo River receives from WIFIA after their letter of interest is submitted and their construction schedule, they may be approaching the Drinking Water Board for some funding probably next year sometime. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Division Strategic Planning Process, Nathan Lundstedt and Mimi.
Ugia.
You what?
Ugia.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry about my last name. It's a mouthful. It's pronounced Ugia.
Yeah.
Amy, do you and Nathan have a presentation you wanted to show?
Yes, Allison or Colt, they're working on that. It's Nathan has the presentation.
Oh, sorry. It's a little lag. Nathan, you're a presenter now. You should be able to share your screen. There you go.
Awesome.
And then just need to unmute yourself.
Microphone off.
There you go.
Oh, there I go.
Okay.
Okay. For some reason, it was not allowing me to unmute. So it looks like you can see my screen. But thank you for letting us present. I'll be co-presenting with Mimi. She's the new assistant director. She's only been here for 2 months, but she has a really strong background in strategic planning and process improvement. And she's already made a really big positive impact on the division these last 2 months. And I know, staff, we're just really excited to be involved in this strategic planning process. There's a lot of benefits, where we're able to give more, focus and direction to the division, help with increased efficiency, and just increase our level of service. And I also want to recognize Scott Morrison. He's our board member representing the board on the committee, and he's been a great asset. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mimi.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to introduce our strategic plan development committee members. These are the internal committee members. And I think Marie is quite a bit younger in that photo. So is everyone else. I tried to be funny and dug up old photos of everyone. Next slide. And these are outside of DDW, the committee members who has been in our meeting since April 10th. We had a weekly meeting that is about 2 hours long. And as Nathan mentioned, Scott Morrison, who represent the board, and Stephen McIntosh, who's the operator for Small Systems, and EDO representative from DEQ, Kim Shelley, and Jared Mendenhall. And you can't really see the grid, but as I said, on April 10th, we started this project and we created vision, mission, purpose statement, and guiding principles. And we are right on target. And in June, if you look down, we're in the process of creating priority goals and objectives.
Then one of the first things we did was come up with a purpose statement. I'll read that in case you can't see that clearly on your screen. But I thought this was pretty powerful and gave a great direction to the division as we endeavor in the strategic planning. And the purpose statement is, look to the future and make meaningful changes in the division that are reasonable, credible, and sustainable to build a framework and mindset that creates robust water systems throughout the state who safeguard Utah's public health. And so far, some of the accomplishments that this committee has finished or in process, it's, we've created this purpose statement. We've conducted a stakeholder analysis. So we've identified, which stakeholders we need to reach out to. And then we've collected data through the SWOT analysis, which is a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. And then we've analyzed that data and we've started on drafting goals.
So what we want to do in SWOT analysis is we want to maximize strength and minimize weaknesses so that the agency can take advantage of the external opportunities to overcome identified threats.
And I know, many of you participated in the SWOT analysis. We shared that with the stakeholders. We did that both for our internal staff, which was anonymous, and then with the outside stakeholders that was not anonymous. But we had, great participation in that. And I believe you have those results in your board packet. But I thought it was interesting to highlight that, for the strengths and weaknesses, the stakeholders and the division staff were very in alignment with those results. But this, the data from that SWOT analysis has been very helpful, and it's helped us narrow down and kind of draft goals for our strategic plan. And these are 3 goals that we've come up with, and these are still in the draft phase. So input from the committee and our division staff, these may be updated or modified slightly. I'll go ahead and read these in case you can't read them clearly on your screen. But goal 1 is strengthen public water systems through effective partnerships. And that's increase the capacity, such as financial, technical, managerial, and infrastructure, and the resiliency of Utah's public water systems through effective communication and shared responsibility. And goal 2 is commitment to regulatory responsibilities. And that's provide greater consistency and compliance to Utah's public water systems through balanced regulation and enforcement. And goal 3 is a commitment to excellence. And we want to strive for greater service, commitment to employees, credibility and trust, and continuous improvement.
So this picture shows the strategic plan hierarchy. The blue section is how far we've come and finished doing. We've done mission, vision, value statement, and strategic goals. We have created those. So now we're moving into creating objectives, action plans, and performance measures. And we're going to be creating objectives that goes under the goals to have specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound targets. And we want to do this by scanning what we call environmental scan. We want to see what we are already doing, such as an EPA partnership agreement, so that we are in alignment of various efforts and not really creating what you see at the bottom arrow there. And so that we're not being pulled in different directions.
And when I see this graphic, I think the engineer comes out in me, especially, bringing that back into drinking water. On the top arrow, we want our alignment to be laminar flow versus the turbulent flow. And the next steps, we've identified some draft goals. We're moving into the SMART objectives, and with that, we'll be completing the strategic plan to wrap up this project, which I'm sure we'll be sharing with the board at the final stage, at a board meeting, or at least with the written plan. So with that, we can open that up to any questions that the board may have.
I thought your presentation was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, we tried to keep that brief, just out of interest of your time. But we appreciate you, participating or being involved, and especially for the feedback that you gave. It was very helpful.
Yes, we thank you very much. The detailed SWOT analysis in your packet.
Okay, and so we're finished unless there's any other specific questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan and Mimi.
Appreciate it, Scott. Thank you.
Dale Pearson, are you here?
Oh, can you unmute, Dale?
Yep. Getting there now. He's there.
Okay.
Dale? He have his own microphone.
Roger, would you like me to move on to item 10 while we're working on?
No, move on, Marie.
Okay. In your board packet, there is an enforcement report that we put in there on a regular basis, so you're welcome to look at that. Know that this is an ongoing changing report, and so we pulled this several weeks ago to be able to be in the report, but the staff is constantly working on resolving these situations and putting new ones on this report. So that is in your packet for you to review. Are there any questions or concerns about items that you see on this enforcement report? Okay, then I will move forward and see if I can share my screen with you.
One second, Marie, let me make you the presenter.
Okay, thank you.
Now you should be able to.
All right. You guys have that now? You see the screen, the presentation?
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So I always know that by the time we get to the director's report, it's been a really long meeting and you're tired. So I will go through this very, very quickly. And I've got slides on all of the bills that we have talked about over the time, so that if you haven't already been informed whether they passed or not, you'll have these in your packet. And so let me know if you want me to stall on any one of these and spend a little bit more time, but I'll move through them quickly. Senate Joint Resolution 2 was encouraging blood level testing for children throughout the state. That passed. Senate Bill 41 created a state water policy. That was a 2-page document that the legislators, items that the legislators should consider as they're reviewing water bills in the future. That passed. House Joint Resolution 3 is the state constitution amendment, which will now be on the general election ballot this fall, which changes the constitution to actually allow water systems to sell water on a surplus basis to communities outside of their jurisdiction. So this has been a 2, maybe 3-year process to get to this point. So that bill passed. There was a bill on drug disposal program that passed. Senate Bill 88 was the bill that the Attorney General's office came and presented before the board in January, adjusting the penalty authority of the board, and that passed. There was a bill on watershed councils that passed that would provide the structure around watershed councils throughout the state. The water loss accounting bill passed. However, it was dramatically changed by the time it passed. The bill that passed essentially said that the water loss accounting program would go to interim session for study and then come back. Senator Andrade had a secondary water requirement, monitoring requirement bill that passed this year. Water facility amendments bill. This was run by Representative Logan, who is now the Commissioner of Ag. And this bill gave additional protections to water facilities when there is acts that damage or impact their facilities. So it created some civil actions that could be taken when somebody illegally connects into a water system or damages or reroutes or a variety of things like that. There was a bill being run by Representative Harrison that passed that requires municipalities and counties to register with the IPAWS system. So during an emergency, they can access that IPAWS system to get emergency notifications out to all of their residents. Then a few bills that did not pass. There was a bill that was introduced to give higher education entities standing as public water suppliers with the Division of Water Rights. That did not pass. Senate Bill 84 related to secondary water and submission of water plans did not pass. The HB 88, which was the bill that would have required schools and child care facilities to test their drinking water for lead in their facilities, did not pass. So that's the list of all of the bills that we were following. Do we have any questions on bills or any bills that the board would like me to go back and speak to in more detail?
Marie, just out of personal interest, can you hear me?
Yes.
On the House Bill 88, the lead testing in school drinking waters, that seems kind of like a no-brainer. Is the opposition to that there's no one to pay for it, the schools can't afford to, or what's the kind of the general pushback on that, if you're aware?
Funding is always a topic that comes up when it is discussed. But personally, I saw the funding concerns be addressed and rectified in both years, both last year and the year before that. My perception of the resistance with this bill is resistance from the entities to document and have to disclose to the public high levels of lead. So whenever we would get past the funding concerns with the program, that would always be the issue that would rise to the level, and it was the issue that we could not resolve because once the data is collected, it needs to be communicated to the public, whatever those results are. So that became the sticking point that couldn't get, the hurdle that we couldn't get over.
And this is Scott Baird, just a little bit, Marie's spot on with that. Part of that context as well is the perceived liability and fear of what may come after making that knowledge available to the public. I don't know that anybody is concerned about making people aware of it, but it's what comes once people are aware of it, and the potential fear that people may have, or the liability as well to any of those facilities.
I guess there's nobody to hold accountable necessarily, but in the end, if it does come out that lead levels are high and people chose not to do anything about it, also seems like there's implied liability with that if you had a choice.
We still have the water infrastructure grant from the federal government that provides funding and can reimburse schools and child care facilities for testing that they voluntarily do. We have had some interest before the pandemic in that program. It's significantly died off since the pandemic, but we do have, originally they granted us $480,000. That has subsequently been bumped up to over $700,000 that is available to pay for this testing.
But no support for abatement.
That is not actually increasing the level of testing. So it's not a funding issue.
But if someone does take that and tests, there is no specific funding available for abatement other than the school district would have to cover that. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
All right. One other thing, during the legislative session, the DEQ requested of the legislature a building block, additional funding request. The request was made for $2.5 million annually for 5 years to create some capacity within the division to be able to transition to at least 35% of the revenue for the division to be from dedicated credits. And dedicated credits is the legislative term for fees. So those fees can be in a variety of different models, and there were some new fees that were enacted in this legislative session, which are really the most significant fees that the division has ever used before. And that is just the first of many phases of those fees. So that was the request, was $2.5 million just for 5 years. And then we believed that within 5 years we would be able to get those fees implemented and start getting those in, and then we could back away from that funding. What the legislature appropriated was $10 million one time for fiscal year 21. So we readjusted and started working through what we would do with this slight change in how that money came in. But we haven't hit the beginning of FY21 yet, and then we had the coronavirus pandemic, and the legislature has since rescinded all of their appropriations from the legislative session. So I guess we're communicating that we had this really great win, and we had a lot of communication, and we worked through and got some really good traction, and then we were hit by unforeseen issues with the coronavirus as well. And so that funding at this point is not available to us, but we will see what the legislature chooses to do, whether they readdress that on their own, or we need to bring it back before them in the next legislative session, or in a couple of years when things settle down. So The graphic on this is just for your interest that statewide we have over 1,400 distinct treatment facilities. We have nearly 2,500 unique drinking water sources and over 1,000 individual distribution systems with their various storage and facilities. So those are the facilities that we as the Division of Drinking Water are overseeing and permitting and keeping in compliance. So what we asked for this money, one, the strategic process that you heard Nathan and Mimi present on was part of that process, but we identified a few opportunities that the funding would have provided for us. One was to modernize our permitting program, which would create the ability for us to review and renew operating permits and exceptions from rule. At this point, all of those previous facilities that you saw in the slide, excuse me, have operating permits, but we never go back and review that. Once they're granted an operating permit, that's a static permit, and some of those are 20 or 30 years old. So we would like to be able to go back and review those and update them up to current practices. We also recognize the opportunities to increase technical assistance. We had over 70 samples that triggered assessments this last year. We also had over 100 response events. What local communities would have considered to be an emergency, boil orders, spills, infrastructure, significant infrastructure failures, those sorts of things. And then just at the last minute, I threw on pandemics as an item that has required additional technical assistance from us. We also identified compliance inspection upgrades as an opportunity for improvement. This is the sanitary surveys. We actually have some systems that have not been surveyed, and we have just in the last few years done a deep sweep of those systems and made sure that we are reaching out to get all of the systems surveyed. And we are working heavily to provide consistency between all of the surveyors that do those surveys. We partner with our local health departments to conduct many of those surveys. And so we've had a focus as of late, and there's still opportunity to provide consistency across those so that regardless of who does your survey, that you're going to get an expected result from that experience. And then finally, we would like to look into creating an incentive program for small water systems, which tend to be more predominantly located in the rural areas of Utah, to be able to come together and form local partnerships. We don't want to necessarily determine what that particular local partnership would look like, but we feel like if those partnerships were made, even on a technical or resource sharing standpoint, that it would create sustainability within these organizations. That could range anywhere from what people would traditionally think of as regionalization or consolidation to merely just sharing a backhoe so that you can clear the roots and vegetations around a spring. So we feel like there's a great possibility for an opportunity to help create some more sustainability in these small systems if we could identify an incentive program that would be meaningful for them. So a couple of things just to report to the board that we are focused on. as staff in 2020. We became acutely aware of continuity of operations on March 13th, when all of a sudden our whole world changed. And so we have been actively reaching out to water systems, trying to hear what their issues are, fielding their concerns to ensure that we have continuity of operations throughout this whole event. The last thing we need on top of a pandemic is a drinking water crisis within the homes. Also, EPA has given us an objective to reduce health-based violations by 25% by the year 2022. So we have been actively working on how we can move towards meeting that objective set by EPA. The board will remember that they passed a rule change in 2019 for changes to the IPS rule, and the staff is busily implementing that and moving forward with that this year. Also, you heard the presentation, we are undertaking strategic planning within the division. As I mentioned, we have instituted new fees that will be effective as of July 1st, 2020. And it is the first phase of many phases. So we will be continuing to look at how to progress with increasing the dedicated credits and fees for the division. As I mentioned, the state is having issues and concerns related to the revenue and the money that is available to the state and therefore to state agencies. So we will be watching that closely. We have been asked to create a proposal for a 2%, 5%, and 10% cut to our ongoing operating budget, and we have submitted that, and we expect in June and July the legislature to decide what of those suggestions and recommendations they're going to implement. And then finally, we are in the process, in the final stages of being audited by the state legislative audit team, and we have been working with them over the last few months. We've given them a significant amount of data, and they are in the process of finalizing a report to give to the legislature on our program with that. So we will be focused on being responsive to their findings and making the necessary changes that they need. Any questions on that? All right. That
you want to introduce the new employees now?
Sure. Let me.
I think if we got Dale back when you're ready, if you want to cut back to Dale's report, I made him a panelist, and I think his mic might work, so you can get to that whenever you want. But I think we can give him a shot.
Should we let Dale in? Dale, you want to do it?
Okay, I will stop sharing my screen and we can go to Dell.
I think his mic is still busted, even when we switched him over. All right, I'll keep working with Dale and try something else if you guys want to go to new employees.
All right. Okay, we've had quite a few employees that are recently brought on. We've got Elisa Brawley, and she is working with Michael in the SRF program. Do we have Elisa on the call?
Yes, I'm on call.
So Elisa, do you want to just give whatever information you want to the board?
Yeah, so my name is Elisa Brawley. I'm in the technical assistant section under Michael Grange. I'm taking over the previous responsibilities that Heather Patty was doing as an environmental coordinator. So yeah, I've been on for 3 months. This is my first board meeting and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Lisa. We're grateful to have her on. All of these employees kind of came on right as we all left the office. So they've had an interesting onboarding experience with us. But I've been very impressed with how each of them have come on and taken on the challenges with our division, and we appreciate you, Lisa. Thank you. Julie Cobley is new with our division in the last few months, but she has been with us before. We have Julie online.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi,
So Julie, welcome back. And if you'll just take a few minutes with the board.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I worked previously for the division for about 12 years as an engineer. And then I worked for a water system, Mountain Regional Water, for about 1.5 years. And now I'm back and have been back for about 3 months. And I'm working as an engineer in the permitting section. And I'm happy to be back. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. We also hired Mimi Ujia, and you heard her earlier as she presented towards the board. Mimi, are you still on to give a little bit of history?
Yes, I am.
Where you came from?
Yes, I have been with the Utah State system for over 15 years. I have had 2 appointed positions with the governor's office, and I have been with the Utah Department of Health. I moved to Southern Nevada around the Vegas area. So my last position was at the Las Vegas and Clark County Health District, Southern Nevada Health District. I came as people are shutting down public services to, and I wasn't sure whether I had a bathroom to use as we moved back to Salt Lake City. And I have only met, I think, 4 people in person, but everybody so far made me feel very welcome, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Mimi. We are very grateful that we were able to get Mimi on board, and we've appreciated her with us so far. Linda Ross is an employee that we've hired into our administrative services group, and she is helping us with our grandma request. Do we have Linda online?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I'm Linda Ross. I've worked with the Division of Child and Family Services for the last 4 years doing their grandmas. So come on and have worked with Sandy doing some of the grandmas and records, and I'll also try to help do some of the office coordination. So everyone's been super friendly. I've really enjoyed being here, and I'm just really excited for this opportunity.
Thank you. Linda is the one employee that we have hired on that I have not actually met yet in person. So I've seen her on camera, but this has been interesting as we've brought new people on. So it's good to have you here, Linda, and we appreciate your help. Russell Seeley is a new district engineer with DEQ, and we rely very heavily on our district engineers for the drinking water program. He has taken the position that Scott Hacking had previously. Scott has retired, and so Russell is serving the southwest or southeast area of the state. Do we have Russell online?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful, Russell. Can you just kind of speak to the board for a minute about yourself?
Yes, so I've been on for about 6 weeks now, and I have met very, very few people. But previous to this position, I was the city engineer for Price, so I'm familiar with the area and familiar with a lot of the people down here.
Thank you, Russell. Appreciate that. And then finally, not last or least, we've brought Brian Petit over. We want to thank Dale for letting us borrow or take his employee. So Brian has been working with Rural Water for several years and put in for one of our open positions, and we were happy to have him. So we have Brian online.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Brian, you want to go ahead and just take a few minutes to speak to the board?
Yeah, I'm very excited to further my career with drinking water. Most of you know me as working with compliance and systems for rural water for the past 6 years. And before that, I came from Logan City, where I put in 30 plus years with them. So super excited with this new assessment response section and working with technical assistance and helping systems provide safe and reliable drinking water.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. So those are our new employees that we have brought on. We still have 3 vacancies that we would like to get filled. Right now, the state is cautious about filling vacancies. So we are working with the executive director's office and the governor's office to move forward cautiously on what is appropriate to fill those positions. But we hope in the next few months that we will be able to introduce a few more employees to the board and fill our vacancies. So with that, I'll turn that back over to you, Roger, and see if we can get Dell.
Dale, are you talking to us yet? It's not looking good.
Dell is talking, but there's no noise. So basically what I think Dell just said is it's a really great report. It's in your packet and you can look at that. And Dell really, really appreciates us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, we'll try this. Okay, try this direction. Now that I've had all of that turmoil, I have no idea what more to say to you all. Like Marie says, the reports are in the packet. And as you just heard, Brian has left our staff and been stolen by your staff, which we are greatly appreciative of. So that has meant that we've had to make some moves within our staff, which are important to you as members of the Drinking Water Board, because they directly affect those that work with the division. Perry Smith, who has been working as our management technician, we've moved over into Brian's former position as compliance circuit rider. I think this is a good fit for Terry. Terry has a lot of technical background as a former public works director for Cedar City. So he knows that side of things as well as what he's been doing quite well. And we'll be able to do that, function with that position. And then to fill the management tech position, we've hired a lady named Janelle Braithwaite, who is the city clerk recorder for the town of Gunnison. And Janelle brings quite a bit of town management, project management expertise to us. I think she'll be an excellent fit. She's been involved with our organization off and on for several years. She used to be on our finance committee, and she's also been actively involved with the Utah Clerks Association or whatever they call that. So I think she'll be a great attribute, very focused on that specific area that we need the management technician to be focused on. Kurt Ludvigson is going to stay where he is for the moment. So anyway, given that, I think that's all I have to say. It was a lot of work to get to say that a little bit, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Any questions for him? Marie, do you have anything else?
No, I don't.
Any public that want to comment? I don't think we have any. Any board discussion that needs to be taken care of? How about the next board meeting? September 1st, 2020 at 1 p.m. at the multi-agency state office building. Are we shooting for that? Or are we going to do one of these things again? We'll see.
We'll see. Let's be optimistic that maybe we can join each other again, and we'll watch the situation closely and email the board if and make sure that you're comfortable with that by September.
Sounds good. We need one more motion, I think.
Motion to adjourn, Dave.
Motion? And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to adjourning ever? No. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
everyone.